The sound that shattered the night was not a scream or a crash, but a small trembling knock that felt louder than thunder in the quiet American suburb, the kind of knock that carried fear on its knuckles and hope in its breath. In a dim hallway lit by a single flickering bulb, a little girl stood barefoot on cold tile, her tiny hands shaking as she clutched a jacket far too big for her. Behind her, a broken door sagged on its hinges, and beyond that door waited a darkness that had already taken too much from her family. On the other side of the wall lived a man the neighborhood barely knew, a man with a reputation for power and distance, and no one could have imagined that this midnight moment would quietly change 3 lives forever. Before the story unfolds any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change destinies, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach hearts that need them. The little girl's name was Grace, and she was 6 years old, with light brown curls that never quite stayed tied and eyes that carried an awareness no child should have so early. She lived in a modest duplex in Ohio with her mother, Rebecca, a woman whose strength was stitched together by exhaustion and quiet prayers whispered at night. Rebecca worked double shifts at a local diner after her husband, Michael, passed away in a highway accident 2 winters earlier. Since then, the world had felt fragile, as if safety were something that could splinter at any moment. The door had been damaged weeks before, swollen wood and a loose frame that never quite closed right, and each night Rebecca pushed a chair against it, telling herself it was enough. That night, it wasn't. The wind had picked up suddenly, slamming the door hard enough to crack the already weakened frame. The sound jolted Rebecca awake, panic flooding her chest as she ran down the hallway. She tried to steady the door, her hands trembling as she realized it would no longer latch at all. The neighborhood had been quiet for years, but fear does not need logic to grow. Grace watched her mother's face change, watched the color drain as memories of being alone pressed in. Rebecca tried to smile, tried to pretend everything was fine, but Grace saw the truth. Fear had a smell and a sound, and children always recognize it. Grace did not cry. She did not freeze. She did something braver. She remembered the man next door, the one who moved in months ago in the renovated house with tall windows and silent nights. She had seen him only a few times, always well-dressed, always distant. His name was Jonathan, and the neighborhood whispered that he was a CEO of some large tech company in Chicago who worked remotely. Grace did not know what a CEO was. She only knew he looked strong, and strength felt like safety. Rebecca protested weakly when Grace wrapped herself in her oversized jacket, but fear makes adults hesitate and children act. Grace slipped out into the cold night, the porch light casting a small pool of courage around her feet. The distance between the 2 houses felt endless, every shadow stretching longer than it should. When she reached the door next door, she lifted her hand and knocked, each tap filled with desperation she did not fully understand. Jonathan Carter had been awake, sitting in his kitchen with a cup of untouched coffee, the glow of his laptop reflecting years of stress and isolation. At 38, he had built a billion-dollar company and lost nearly everything else. His wife, Hannah, had died 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving behind a house full of echoes and a heart that stayed closed to keep from breaking again. When the knock came, his first instinct was irritation, quickly replaced by confusion. No one ever came to his door. When he opened it, the sight before him cut through the armor he wore so carefully. A small girl, shivering, eyes wide with fear but burning with resolve, standing alone at midnight. Jonathan did not need words to understand something was wrong. He grabbed a coat, locked his door behind him, and followed Grace back across the cold grass, every step awakening a part of him he thought was gone. Inside the duplex, the air was heavy with fear and embarrassment. Rebecca tried to apologize through tears, shame mixing with relief as Jonathan assessed the broken door. He said nothing dramatic, made no promises. He simply went to his car, returned with tools, and worked quietly, his movements steady and sure. He reinforced the frame, adjusted the hinges, and secured the lock as if it were the most important job he had ever done. Grace watched from the hallway, clutching her jacket, feeling something settle inside her chest for the first time that night. When the door finally closed with a solid, comforting click, the sound felt like a miracle. Jonathan stayed a little longer, checking windows, making sure everything was safe. Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, overwhelmed by gratitude she did not know how to express. Jonathan left without ceremony, but something lingered in the air long after he walked back home. Safety had returned, but so had hope. In the days that followed, small changes began to ripple outward. Jonathan started waving when he saw Grace outside. Rebecca baked banana bread and left it on his porch, her way of saying thank you. Grace drew pictures and slipped them under his door, colorful crayon scenes of houses with strong doors and smiling people. Jonathan found himself smiling more, sleeping better. The house next door no longer felt empty. Weeks turned into months, and winter softened into spring. Jonathan quietly arranged for a contractor to replace Rebecca's door entirely, claiming it was leftover materials from a project. He helped Grace with her math homework in the evenings, his sharp business mind rediscovering patience through small fingers counting numbers. Rebecca watched it all with cautious hope, afraid to believe life could feel warm again. The real test came one evening when Rebecca collapsed at work from exhaustion and dehydration. Grace panicked when her mother did not come home on time, fear roaring back like a storm. This time, she did not have to knock alone. Jonathan was already there, kneeling beside Rebecca in the hospital room, holding Grace's hand with quiet reassurance. He stayed through the night, reading medical charts with the same focus he once gave board meetings, refusing to leave until Rebecca was stable. As Rebecca recovered, she learned pieces of Jonathan's past, the loss that shaped him, the loneliness that hid behind success. She shared her own grief, the nights she cried after Grace fell asleep, the constant fear of failing as a mother. They did not rush anything. Healing rarely does. Instead, they built something steady, something real, brick by brick, much like the door that started it all. Grace noticed the changes before anyone else. Laughter returned to the house. Sunday dinners became a tradition. Jonathan's once quiet home filled with warmth, drawings taped to the fridge, and the sound of life moving forward. He began turning down extra work, choosing presence over profit. Rebecca returned to school part-time, determined to build a better future not just for Grace, but for herself. Just before the ending of this story, take a moment to comment below and share where you are watching from or who this story reminds you of. Your words matter more than you know. The night that once held fear became a memory transformed. A year later, on a calm evening under soft porch lights, Jonathan stood in the doorway of Rebecca's home, not as a rescuer, but as family. Grace, now taller and brighter, ran between them, laughter echoing against walls that no longer shook. The door stood strong, but stronger still were the people behind it.